So the source code comes with pretty much all the graphics primitives I think you probably need, and a set of the graphics GUI controls. So the GUI controls such things as buttons, text boxes, checkboxes, things like that. But you're likely to want to add new GUI controls. So in this video, I'll talk about how to add graphics primitives and GUI controls, and that should provide also, even if you don't want to add extra primitives or GUI controls, you'll get an understanding of how they're put together and how they work. So when you use them in higher up the application, you'll have a better understanding of what's going on. So all of the graphics primitives and the GUI controls are defined in this file graphdraw.c, and the most basic of them is this one here, graph plot inline. And graph plot inline you wouldn't actually call from your application itself because it's an inline function, and it's here to improve the performance of all the other graphics primitives functions. So if I scroll down a little bit, and so the first one is this graph draw plot, and it calls graph draw plot inline like that, and then graph draw line, or draw graph line I should say, it then does what it needs to do and it calls the graph draw plot inline function itself. So that's how they're all constructed. They make calls to each other. It reduces the amount of program space. It also simplifies the amount of editing that you might want to do if you need to change anything. If you need to debug something, you fix it in one place, and then because they're cascaded to each other, you'd be fixing it in all of the places just to simplify the code a bit. So this function here is graph draw polygon. So if you wanted to draw anything more complex than a rectangle, what you can do is you can pass in a series of x and y coordinates into this, and it can be a series of any length of x and y coordinates, and it will draw your polygon in whatever shape you want it to be drawn. So that's a basic overview of the graphics primitives, and it should be quite simple to see how you could expand on those if you needed to expand on them, although they're quite comprehensive. I mean, there's arcs and circles you can draw as well with these. What you should notice also is there's no calls to semaphores to lock the LCD display in these, because what these get called from is the application, and the place where the application calls these, it will be calling a series of these in a row, or it might be from a a GUI control. It will be calling a series of these, and so the application itself at the outer bound will be locking the LCD display rather than having to lock it for every single individual one, and that makes things a lot more performant and also makes things simpler to understand. But if I scroll down further in here, so both the graphics primitives and the GUI controls are defined in this file. So here's one of the button controls, and this will make calls to other GUI controls. So there's a basic button control, so this calls that, which will display that button, the basic button, and then it will make calls to the graphics primitives as well. So you can take existing GUI controls, display them, and then add extra features to the controls themselves, and then it draws a bitmap on top of the button as well. But if I find the actual button control, you will also see in that, or it should probably just be above these ones here. So these all derived off the button. So here's the button control, the basic one. So it does all these calls to the primitives. It doesn't actually call. It doesn't actually display a control itself because it's the base control. But what you need to do is set the graph range. When you define a control, you say what its bounds are, and then you can fill the back color. Then you draw on top of that, and then at the very end of it, you won't find this line in the other ones because it does it in the base control. Is you can register for a touch event. So when you do this, you can pass it in a message ID, which I'll show you in a different file, and that will register that message to occur automatically in the application when someone touches the control. So all you're doing is creating the display here, but later on in some other code, because it's automatically registered this for a touch event, you'll automatically get a touch event in your main application occurring. So in the file common.h, you will find the definitions for the message IDs, and the top message IDs here, system message IDs. But here, just below there, you can see that this is these are my IDs for my config display, and you can see when someone presses the up button for the duty cycle or the down button for the duty cycle, you've got the message IDs defined over on the right hand side. The message IDs have to be unique, and then when you receive that message ID, you also receive the context of which app mode it's in or which screen, and then from there you can decide what action you want to take on that message ID in your application.